people were probably astounded by what they were seeing because clearly the ocean floor had enormous changes in relief.
Cameras reached the Mariana Trench's deepest point, and what they recorded is shocking. For the first time in history, high-definition equipment made it all the way to the Challenger Deep, the absolute bottom of our planet. And the footage came back, showing things that have absolutely no right to exist down there. Creatures that wear metal armor, organisms with no mouths that have never once needed sunlight to survive. A fully functioning world operating in total darkness under pressure that would crush a military submarine flat in seconds. Scientists who have spent their entire careers studying the deep ocean went quiet when they saw this footage.
At the Mariana Trench, human life is impossible. We're not equipped to resist those kinds of pressures.
But here's the thing, none of the headlines told you. The single most disturbing image captured by those cameras at the bottom of the world wasn't biological. It wasn't geological. It was something that traveled 7 miles straight down from your world into theirs. And once you see it, you simply cannot unsee it. The extreme. Trench, the Mariana. Trench is a crescent-shaped scar carved into the ocean floor, stretching roughly 1,580 miles. That's 2,542 kilometers, from north to south. It is easily one of the longest geological features on this planet. But the length isn't what makes scientists lose sleep, it's the depth. At its lowest point, a location called the Challenger Deep, the trench plunges to 36,037 feet. That's 10,984 meters straight down into the Pacific seafloor. To put that in a context, your brain can actually hold on to. If you picked up Mount Everest and dropped it into this trench, the summit would still be sitting under more than a mile of ocean. The trench doesn't just dwarf the tallest mountain on Earth, it swallows it entirely and doesn't notice. For a long time, scientists assumed this place was a silent, barren grave, a void. A dead zone where nothing survived and nothing of consequence ever happened. That assumption was completely wrong. Recent missions by the Schmidt, Ocean Institute, and other deep-sea research teams have revealed a world that is loud, active, and overflowing with behavior that defies explanation. Using advanced remotely operated vehicles and crewed submersibles equipped with high-definition cameras and precision sampling tools, they reached the true bottom of the Challenger Deep. And what those cameras transmitted back was a total shock to the system. Here's the catch. The water pressure at that depth is over 1,000 times greater than what we experience at sea level. To make that tangible, imagine stacking 3 full-size cars directly on top of your thumbnail. That's the crushing, relentless force pressing in from every direction. Any normal creature would be obliterated instantly. Bones compressed, organs ruptured, body reduced to nothing. And yet, somehow, life not only exists at that depth, it has built a fully functioning ecosystem with predators, prey, scavengers, and decomposers operating in permanent darkness. One of the most captivating things the cameras found was the Mariana snailfish. This animal holds the record for the deepest living fish ever recorded, filmed at roughly 26,830 feet, 8,178 meters down. It doesn't look like a survivor. It's translucent, pinkish, almost ghostly, with a soft and gelatinous body that seems completely at odds with its environment. It has no swim bladder. The pressure would simply pop it like a balloon. Instead, evolution gave it a body built from soft cartilage that bends and flexes rather than shattering under the weight of all that water. And get this, these delicate-looking fish are the apex predators in their world. They cruise through absolute darkness, eating tiny crustaceans, completely unbothered in a place where no unprotected human could survive for even a fraction of a second. They own that darkness. It belongs to them. But the fish were just the beginning. The cameras also captured something the scientists hadn't fully anticipated: massive colonies of microbes blanketing the rocks like white snow. These aren't random germs. They are highly complex communities of chemosynthetic organisms, microscopic life forms that consume methane and hydrogen as their energy source. No sunlight required. What most people don't realize is that these microbes may hold the key to understanding how life first emerged on Earth, billions of years before the first plant ever turned sunlight into energy. And then there was the phenomenon that kept appearing no matter where the cameras pointed: deep sea gigantism. In the trench, creatures that are microscopic near the surface grow to proportions that make no intuitive sense. Scientists found amphipods, shrimp-like crustaceans that, in shallow water, are the size of a grain of rice, measuring over 7 inches long down here. That's 18 centimeters. These giants are the cleanup crew of the abyss, consuming whatever organic material rains down from the world above. Dead whales, rotting fish, the constant slow fall of microscopic particles from the sunlit world they will never see. Every time a camera reaches the bottom of the Mariana Trench, it finds something that should be impossible. The snailfish, the microbes, the giant amphipods. Each one a separate argument that our model of how life works is incomplete. But as the earliest cameras descended, decades before the current missions, before remotely operated vehicles, before high-definition footage, the men guiding them didn't have robots. They had only themselves, a steel hull, and the dark. And one of those men was about to hear a sound that should have ended everything. Primitive deep missions. Before we had fiber optic cables and remotely operated vehicles, we had 2 men in a steel sphere dropping blind into the deepest place on Earth. In January of 1960, explorers Don Walsh and Jacques Picard climbed into a vessel called the Trieste. It looked less like a submarine and more like an underwater blimp, a massive float tank full of gasoline to provide buoyancy, and a tiny pressurized steel sphere bolted to the bottom where the men would sit. No sophisticated electronics, no real-time communication with the surface, no abort system that could pull them back up if something went wrong, just steel, physics, and the decision they had already made. The descent to the bottom took nearly 5 hours. As they dropped deeper, the light outside their viewport faded from blue to absolute black. The temperature fell toward freezing. The ocean pressed in from every direction, harder and harder, searching for any weakness in the hull. Then, at around 30,000 feet, 9,144 meters down, it found one. A sharp, thunderous crack split the silence inside the sphere. Walsh and Picard looked at each other in the red glow of their instrument lights. One of the thick plexiglass viewing windows had fractured under the pressure. Not failed completely, not shattered, but cracked. A deep structural crack that hadn't been there 60 seconds ago. The kind of crack that might hold for another 6,000 feet. Or might not. They had no way to know. They were still more than a mile above the bottom of the world. The surface was nearly 6 miles above them in the opposite direction. There was no rescue operation on standby. No emergency signal that could summon help in time. No second option. No protocol that covered this exact moment. In total darkness, in freezing water, with a cracked hull and the pressure of 1,000 atmospheres pressing in from every direction, Don Walsh and Jacques Picard had to make a decision that no training manual and no voice from above could make for them. They had to make it alone, right now, in the dark. They looked at the crack. They looked at each other. They chose to keep going. When they finally touched the bottom at approximately 35,800 feet, 10,912 meters, they had 20 minutes before they needed to start back up. They had no cameras. But Picard pressed his face to the fractured viewport and reported seeing a flatfish and several shrimp moving through the silt. The scientific community was stunned. The consensus at the time was absolute. Nothing could live at that depth. The Trieste mission shattered that in 20 minutes with no cameras and a cracked window. But it left more questions than answers, and for over 50 years, no one went back. The trench became a place of myth, darker and more alien than the surface of Mars. That changed in 2012 when filmmaker James Cameron built his own torpedo-shaped submersible called the Deep Sea Challenger and made the dive himself. He spent 3 hours at the bottom filming and collecting sediment samples, describing the floor as lunar and desolate, a flat expanse of fine mud like a desert under an alien sky. But here's the catch. What looked empty to the naked eye was crawling with life. His samples yielded over 68 new species, mostly bacteria and previously undescribed crustaceans. The desert was a laboratory. Then, in 2019, Victor Vescovo took things further than anyone. He didn't dive once. He descended multiple times, treating the deepest point on Earth like a repeatable research destination. His team found vividly colored rock formations that turned out to be chemical deposits laid down by geological activity. evidence that the Earth is still extraordinarily active 7 miles down, constantly leaking minerals that feed the local ecosystem. And get this, Vescovo's team recorded a strange, haunting noise from the deep that analysts couldn't immediately identify. Speculation ran wild. An unknown creature? When the data finally came back fully processed, the answer was both more ordinary and more astonishing. A bride's whale. These massive animals were communicating across the deep ocean, their calls traveling through miles of crushing dark water, bouncing off canyon walls 7 miles down, reaching the very bottom of the world. The trench isn't isolated, it's connected to the surface in ways we are only beginning to understand, and what it has been quietly receiving from the surface, besides whale songs, is something the cameras weren't prepared to find. If you want to keep going down with us as we uncover what those cameras actually found, subscribe right now. Because what comes next is where this story gets genuinely hard to believe. Abyssal nature wonders. The deeper you go, the stranger life gets. In the Mariana Trench, the animals haven't just adapted. They've developed biological strategies that have no parallel anywhere else on Earth. Take the giant amphipods. Scientists recently discovered that these creatures extract aluminum directly from the ocean floor and incorporate it into their shells, using the metal to structurally reinforce their bodies against the crushing pressure. They are literally wearing metal armor. And here's what makes this completely extraordinary. This is the only known species on Earth that does this. Not one other animal in the biological record has ever been documented using extracted environmental metal as a structural material. It is a total game changer for how biologists think about the boundary between geology and life. Then there are the Dumbo octopuses. Named after the cartoon elephant because of their large, ear-like fins, they are the deepest living octopuses on the planet. And unlike every other octopus species, they have no ink sacs. The reason is almost darkly logical. In a place where it is already absolute, impenetrable pitch black, deploying an ink cloud as a defense is completely useless. Evolution removed what wasn't needed and kept only what worked. They drift silently through the darkness, hunting by touch and instinct, invisible in a world where visibility doesn't exist. In 2021, the Chinese research submersible Fenduje documented something the team was not expecting: dense forests of tube worms growing in, thick clusters across the seafloor, resembling underwater gardens from a world that predates complex life. These worms can reach 12 inches, 30 centimeters, in length, and here's what stops you cold when you really think about it. They have no mouths, no stomachs, no digestive system of any kind. They survive entirely through a symbiotic relationship with bacteria living inside their own tissue. The worms absorb hydrogen sulfide and other chemicals from the seafloor. The bacteria convert those chemicals into nutrition. Both organisms survive without a single photon of sunlight ever touching the system. Here's what nobody expected. Most people think of life as fundamentally dependent on the sun, photosynthesis driving everything from the smallest plant to the largest predator. The Mariana Trench doesn't just challenge that, it dismantles it completely. Down here, life is about chemistry. Wherever the right chemicals exist, at the right temperature, with water present, something will find a way to live. This isn't a footnote. It's one of the most significant biological realizations of the last 100 years, and it changes where we think life might exist beyond this planet. Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, has a liquid ocean beneath a frozen surface with no access to sunlight. Enceladus, orbiting Saturn, has hydrothermal vents on its ocean floor. If tube worms can survive without sunlight in the Mariana Trench, then the case for life in those places just got a lot stronger. The cameras also moved across vast fields of sea cucumbers crawling across the floor. Not the kind you'd find in a shallow reef. These are translucent. You can see their internal organs working as they move through the silt. They consume marine snow, the constant slow-motion blizzard of dead organisms, waste, and organic particles drifting down from the surface, 36,000 feet above. They have been doing this for hundreds of millions of years, long before humans existed, long before mammals existed. They were here in the dark, processing the world's dead, running their quiet chemistry, completely indifferent to everything happening above. They are the janitors of the abyss, and they are extraordinarily good at their job. But here's the deal. Something else was drifting down from the surface. something that had nothing to do with biology. And when the research team started finding it, inside the animals, in the sediment, sitting in the open silt, the entire tone of these missions changed. The cameras were about to capture the most disturbing image in the history of deep-sea exploration. And it wasn't a creature. Chemosynthetic world discovery. The most recent expeditions have focused on the fractures and fault lines running through the Earth's crust at the very bottom of the trench. These are the zones where massive tectonic plates pull apart or grind against each other with incomprehensible force. In those zones, superheated, mineral-rich, chemicals seep from the Earth and create what researchers are calling rivers of life. In 2021, a research team documented a chemosynthetic ecosystem at the bottom of the Mariana Trench that was far larger and more complex than anyone had predicted. Thousands of clams and snails were packed together like cobblestones, wall to wall across the seafloor. These animals are part of an enormous self-sustaining energy web that begins not with the sun, but with the chemical reactions happening inside the Earth's own crust. And get this, these ecosystems are generating their own methane, not from decaying organic matter, not from underground gas deposits. The microbes produce methane as a byproduct of simply being alive. The trench is a self-sustaining energy factory running on geochemistry, completely independent of the surface world in almost every way. The crazy part is that the microbes down here don't care about us. They were here before multicellular life existed. They follow their own rules, powered by heat and chemistry, indifferent to everything happening above them. They are, in the most literal sense, the original life on Earth, and studying them may rewrite the textbooks on how biology actually works, and where in the universe life might be hiding. Some scientists have suggested that the Mariana Trench is the closest thing we have to a time machine. The conditions at the bottom, the pressure, the chemistry, the total darkness, the heat seeping from geological vents, closely mirror what scientists believe early Earth looked like 4 billion years ago, long before the first photosynthetic organism ever evolved. If life began in hydrothermal vent systems on the ancient seafloor, the Mariana Trench is showing us exactly how it happened in real time, right now. But here's the deal. While those ancient microbes are running their silent billion-year-old chemistry in the dark, something else has been arriving at the bottom of the world. Quietly, steadily, for decades. When researchers dissected the giant amphipods collected from the Challenger Deep, they found microplastics embedded in the gut tissue of nearly every single animal. 7 miles down, at the most remote point on the surface of this planet, the animals are eating our garbage. The plastic doesn't arrive in one event. It drifts. It follows the deep current systems, carried by the same forces that move heat and nutrients through the ocean, until it finds the lowest point available. And once it arrives, it stays. There is no sunlight at 36,000 feet to break it down. No wave action, no erosion. Whatever reaches the bottom of the Mariana Trench is there for hundreds of years. And then Victor Vescovo, sitting in his steel sphere at the deepest point on Earth, looked through his viewport at the ancient silt and saw a candy wrapper, next to creatures that have existed for millions of years, next to organisms that survived the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs, next to life forms that predate complex animals entirely, a candy wrapper. And then, sitting alone in the silence of the deepest place on Earth, the cameras found something else, a beer bottle, upright in the mud, just sitting there, like it had always been there, like it belonged. No scientific paper can convey what that image does to you. The research teams had traveled farther below the surface of the Earth than any camera had ever reached, past every depth record, past every known ecosystem, past the last threshold where anyone thought to look. And what was waiting for them at the very bottom was something they had put there themselves. A lot of people wonder how a beer bottle gets 7 miles underwater. The answer is simple. It sinks. Glass is dense. Once it enters the ocean's deep circulation currents, it follows them to the lowest point on the planet, and it stays. It stays because there is nothing down there to destroy it. No UV light, no mechanical force, no decomposition. The deepest point on Earth is a permanent archive, and we've been filling it without meaning to. Hands down, the most shocking thing those cameras recorded at the Mariana Trench's deepest point was not a new species, not a geological wonder, not a creature wearing metal armor or a worm with no mouth. It was a beer bottle, sitting alone and upright in the silence of the Challenger Deep, 7 miles from the surface of a world that put it there. There is no such thing as a remote place anymore. What do you think is the most shocking discovery at the bottom of the Mariana Trench? The metal-armored shrimp, the worms with no mouths, or the beer bottle sitting at the bottom of the world? Drop it in the comments. And if this took you somewhere you didn't expect, like the video and subscribe. We go deep every single week.